high in the Swiss Alps, where the air is thin and the silence is absolute. There are villages that seem to float between earth and sky. Grindelwald, Wengen, Mürren, Gimmelwald. These are not just mountain villages. They are masterpieces of human endurance, built on cliffs so steep that most people would never dare to build. Perched at altitudes where winter lasts for 8 months. Connected to the outside world by nothing but cable cars and narrow mountain paths. The people who live here do not just survive. They thrive. Stay with me. This is Switzerland's most beautiful mountain village, and the story of how it was built against all odds. The Swiss Alps are not gentle. They are jagged, unforgiving, relentless. The Eiger North Face, 1,800 meters of vertical rock. One of the most dangerous climbs on Earth. Over 60 climbers have died trying to conquer it. The Jungfrau, 4,158 meters above sea level. The top of Europe, as the Swiss call it. The Perched, 4,107 meters. 3 giants that dominate the skyline of the Bernese Oberland. And at their feet, villages that have stood for over 800 years. Grindelwald was first mentioned in historical records in 1146. That is over 800 years ago. Wengen was settled in the 13th century. Mürren in the 14th. These villages existed before Switzerland was even a country. Before the United States was founded. Before the Industrial Revolution. The people who built them had no modern tools. No helicopters. No cable cars. They carried stones up the mountain on their backs. They built homes by hand. They survived winters that buried their villages under 10 meters of snow. And they stayed. The valley of Grindelwald was formed by glaciers during the last ice age. The glaciers carved the U-shaped valley. They deposited the soil that became the farmland. They created the waterfalls that now cascade from the cliffs. The people who came here understood the land. They respected it. They adapted to it. And they made it their home. The Jungfrau Railway is one of the greatest engineering achievements of all time. It was built between 1896 and 1912, 16 years of construction, 7 kilometers of tunnel carved through solid rock. The railway climbs from 2,061 meters at Kleinscheidegg to 3,454 meters at Jungfrau. That is an elevation gain of 1,393 meters. It is the highest railway station in Europe. The top of Europe, as it is called. The construction was a nightmare. The workers had to dig through granite. They used dynamite. They used hand drills. They worked in conditions of extreme cold. And there was no ventilation. The dust from the drilling caused silicosis. Many workers died. Over 30 men lost their lives during construction. But they finished it. On August 1, 1912, the railway opened. It was a triumph of human will. Today, millions of visitors take this train. They ride through the mountain. They stop at the Eiger North station. They watch the North Face pass by their window. They arrive at Jungfrau. They stand on the glacier. They look out at the mountains. They feel the thin air. And they wonder how it was built. The Jungfrau Railway was the vision of Adolf Geierzeller, a Swiss industrialist. He dreamed of building a railway to the top of the Jungfrau. Everyone told him it was impossible. The mountain was too steep. The rock was too hard. The weather was too extreme. He did not listen. He started the project in 1896. He died in 1899, but his vision lived on. The railway was completed 13 years after his death. His son continued the work. The workers who built it were Italian. They came from the Valtellina region. They were experienced tunnel builders. They earned 120 francs a month. They worked 10-hour days. They lived in wooden barracks at the construction site. They died from silicosis. They died from accidents. They died from the cold. But they built the railway, and it still runs today. The Eiger North Face, 1,800 meters of vertical rock. It is called the Wall of Death by climbers. It is one of the most dangerous climbs in the world. The first successful ascent was in 1938. It took 4 climbers 3 days. They climbed through the night. They climbed through storms. They climbed through avalanches. Since 1935, over 60 climbers have died. Some of them are still on the mountain. Their bodies were never recovered. The most famous tragedy was in 1936. 3 German climbers and 1 Austrian climber. They were caught in a storm. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. They froze to death. One of them cut his hand on a rock. He bled to death on the mountain. The other 3 watched him die. Then they died themselves. The North Face is so dangerous that the Swiss government built a tunnel through the mountain for rescue purposes. But even with the tunnel, the North Face is still deadly. Every year, climbers attempt the ascent. Some of them succeed. Some of them die. The Eiger does not care. It has been there for millions of years. It will be there for millions more. The North Face was first climbed in 1938 by Andreas Heckmair, Ludwig Vorg, Fritz Kasperek, and Heinrich Harrer. Harrer wrote a book about the ascent, The White Spider. It is considered one of the greatest climbing books ever written. He described the feeling of being on the North Face. The mountain has a will of its own. You cannot defeat it. You can only survive it. Since 1938, the North Face has been climbed by thousands of people, but it has also killed dozens. The most recent death was in 2023. A climber fell from the face. His body was found at the base. The North Face does not forgive. Grindelwald, the most beautiful mountain village in Switzerland, nestled in a valley at 1,034 meters above sea level, surrounded by the Eiger, the Perched, and the Jungfrau. 4,500 people call this village home. They live in traditional Swiss chalets, wooden buildings with flower boxes on every window, carved wooden balconies overlooking the valley, the famous Grindelwald church, its spire pointing toward the mountains like a prayer. In summer, the valley turns green. Waterfalls cascade down from the cliffs. Hiking trails stretch for hundreds of kilometers. In winter, the village becomes a wonderland. Snow covers everything. The only sound is the crunch of boots on fresh powder. But Grindelwald is not just beautiful. It is resilient. In 2016, the village was threatened by an avalanche. Hundreds of tons of snow came rushing down the mountain. The people of Grindelwald had no choice but to evacuate. They left their homes, their businesses, their lives. They waited. And when the danger passed, they returned. They rebuilt. They stay. Grindelwald is also the starting point for the most famous hike in Switzerland, the Eiger Trail. It follows the base of the Eiger North Face. The trail is 6 kilometers long. Takes 3 hours. The views are extraordinary. The North Face towers above you. The glaciers are visible. The valley is below. The trail was built by the Swiss Alpine Club in 1946. It has been hiked by millions of people. It is considered one of the most beautiful hikes in the world. Grindelwald's history goes back to the 12th century. The first mention of the village was in 1146. It was a small farming settlement. The people grew barley and potatoes. They raised cattle and goats. They lived in wooden huts. They were poor. They were isolated. But they survived. The 18th century brought the first tourists. They came from England. They came to climb the mountains. They came to see the glaciers. They came to experience the sublime. The first ascent of the Jungfrau was in 1811. It took 2 brothers, Johann and Hieronymus Meyer. They were from Aargau. They climbed with 3 guides. They reached the summit after 14 hours of climbing. The first ascent of the Eiger was in 1858. It took Charles Barrington and 2 guides. They climbed the west flank. The route is now called the Barrington Route. The first ascent of the Perched was in 1857. It took Christian Almer and 2 guides. He was a legendary mountain guide. He made the first ascents of many peaks in the Alps. The Swiss Alpine Club was founded in 1863. It was the first mountaineering club in Switzerland. It built huts. It marked trails. It rescued climbers, preserved the mountains. Today, the Swiss Alpine Club has over 150,000 members. It maintains over 150 huts. It protects the alpine environment. It is the guardian of the Swiss mountains. Lauterbrunnen, a valley carved by glaciers over millions of years. 72 waterfalls cascade from the cliffs that surround it. Staubach Falls, 297 meters high. The water atomizes into mist before it reaches the ground. Trummelbach Falls, a series of 10 waterfalls hidden inside the mountain. They carry 20,000 liters of water per second. The water has carved tunnels through the rock over thousands of years. J.R.R. Tolkien visited this valley in 1911. He called it the inspiration for Rivendell, the elf haven in The Lord of the Rings. He wrote about it in his letters. The village of Lauterbrunnen sits at the bottom of this valley. 600 people. No cars in the center. Only walking paths and horse-drawn carriages. The church of Lauterbrunnen, built in the 13th century. Its steeple stands in the shadow of the cliffs. The graveyard is filled with the names of people who have lived here for generations. They are buried facing the mountains. They stay. The valley of Lauterbrunnen is also the starting point for the hike to Mürren. Takes 2 hours. The trail climbs through the forest, passes waterfalls, crosses streams. It follows the cliff edge. The views are extraordinary. The valley is below. The mountains are above. You feel like you are walking in a dream. Wengen, perched on a mountain ledge at 1,274 meters above sea level. Accessible only by cable car or train. No roads reach Wengen. No cars. No buses. Only the mountain railway that climbs up from Lauterbrunnen. 1,300 people live in Wengen. They carry their groceries up on the train. Their furniture. Their building materials. Everything comes by rail or by cable car. In winter, the village is buried in snow. The sun rises at 10 a.m. and sets at 3 p.m. Only 5 hours of daylight. The people of Wengen have learned to live in darkness. They build fires. They share meals. They wait for spring. The view from Wengen is extraordinary. The Jungfrau rises directly in front of the village. The Eiger and the Manche on either side. The valley of Lauterbrunnen below. The people of Wengen wake up to this view every morning. They never get tired of it. And they stay. Wengen is also the starting point for the hike to the Jungfrau. The trail climbs through the mountains. Takes 6 hours. Passes through the Eigerwald. Crosses the Manche. It arrives at the Jungfrau. The view from the trail is breathtaking. The north face of the Eiger. The glacier. The valley. The world. Mürren, the highest village in the Bernese Oberland. 1,638 meters above sea level. Above the clouds. The village was first settled in the 14th century. The original inhabitants were farmers. They grew barley and potatoes on the steep slopes. They raised cattle and goats. They lived in stone houses with wooden roofs. In winter, the snow was so deep that the village was completely cut off. They would not see another person for months. The only way in and out was on foot. Through the snow. Across the mountains. Today, Mürren is a tourist destination. But it has not lost its soul. The houses are still traditional. The streets are still narrow and winding. The church still stands at the center of the village. On clear days, the view from Mürren is unparalleled. The Eiger, the Manche, and the Jungfrau dominate the skyline. The valley of Lauterbrunnen lies far below. The clouds drift through the valley like a river of mist. People come from all over the world to see this view, to feel the thin air, to experience the silence. The people of Mürren have been seeing this view for 800 years. And they stay. Mürren is also the starting point for the hike to the Schilthorn. The trail climbs through the mountains. Takes 2 hours. It passes through the alpine meadows. It arrives at the Schilthorn. The view from the summit is extraordinary. The Eiger, the Manche, the Jungfrau, the Lake of Thun, the Lake of Brienz, all of them visible from the top. The Schilthorn is a mountain in the Bernese Alps, 2,970 meters above sea level. It is famous for the revolving restaurant at its summit. 'Tis Gloria. James Bond fans will recognize it. It was featured in the film On Her Majesty's Secret Service. In 1969, the film crew came to this mountain. They filmed the climactic scene here. The restaurant rotates 360 degrees. once per hour. You can sit in your seat and watch the mountains, the Eiger, the Mach, the Jungfrau, all of them passing by your window. It is a tourist attraction now, but it is also a feat of engineering. The restaurant was built at 2,970 meters, in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The workers had to climb the mountain every day. They carried materials on their backs. They worked in temperatures below freezing. And they built a revolving restaurant on top of a mountain, because the Swiss do not believe in impossible. Gimmelwald, a tiny village hidden in the mountains above Mürren. Only 100 people live here. There are no hotels in Gimmelwald, no restaurants, no shops, only a small inn and a few Ghosthouses. The village is a collection of traditional farmhouses, wooden buildings with stone foundations, flower boxes on every window, cows grazing on the steep slopes, the bells around their necks echoing across the valley. The people of Gimmelwald are farmers. They have been farming these slopes for 500 years. They cut hay by hand. They milk their cows twice a day. They make cheese in the traditional way. In the summer, the village is green and alive. Wildflowers cover the meadows. The waterfalls are full. The sun stays until late in the evening. In winter, the village disappears under snow. Only the smoke from the chimneys reveals that anyone lives there. A young man from Zurich moved to Gimmelwald 5 years ago. He traded the city for the mountains. He says he has never been happier. "Would you leave?" he asks, pointing to the view. And you understand. Gimmelwald has no cars, no roads, no electricity in some houses. The people who live here have chosen to live without modern conveniences. They do not want them. They want the silence. They want the stars. They want the mountains. And they stay, perched on a steep slope in the Swiss Alps. A house that should not exist. The Swiss mountain house, designed by Italian architect John Salas. The house is a series of interlocking cubes, glass walls that offer uninterrupted views of the mountains, a roof that blends into the landscape. The house was built at 2,000 meters above sea level. The construction was a logistical nightmare. Every single piece of material had to be flown in by helicopter. The builder had to work in winter conditions, in temperatures below freezing, in winds that would knock a person off their feet. But the result is a masterpiece. A house that seems to float above the valley. A house that is both beautiful and functional. A house that proves humans can build anywhere, if they are willing to work hard enough, if they are willing to take the risk, if they are willing to stay. The house has been featured in architectural magazines. It has won awards. It has inspired other architects. But it remains unique. It is a statement about what is possible, a statement about what humans can achieve. For centuries, the people of these villages were farmers. They did not live in the village year-round. In summer, they moved their cattle to the high alpine meadows. They built temporary huts. They lived in them for months. They made cheese. They tended the cows. They worked from sunrise to sunset. In autumn, they brought the cattle down. They stored the hay. They prepared for winter. The alpine farming tradition is called Alpwirtschaft. It has existed for over 1,000 years. It is still practiced today. The farmers of Grindelwald, Wengen, Mürren, and Gimmelwald, they still take their cattle to the high meadows. They still live in the huts. They still make cheese. The only difference is that now they have help. Tourists come to see the alpine farms. They buy the cheese. They take pictures. They learn about the old way of life. The farmers of the Swiss Alps are not just farmers. They are guardians of tradition. They are preserving a way of life that has existed for over 1,000 years. Why do they stay? The people who live in these villages. The people who have lived here for centuries. Why do they not leave? The winters are brutal. The isolation is real. The danger is ever present. Avalanches, rockfalls, extreme cold. The work is hard. The days are short. The nights are long. Why do they stay? Because the mountains are their home. Because they cannot imagine living anywhere else. Because the mountains give them something that cities cannot. Silence. clarity, a sense of belonging. The people who live here know something that the rest of the world has forgotten. They know that a good life is not measured in speed or money or status. It is measured in connection to the land, to the community, to something larger than themselves. They stay because they want to. Switzerland's most beautiful mountain village, Grindelwald, Wengen, Mürren, Gimmelwald, they are not just places. They are stories. Stories of survival, of resilience, of people who refuse to leave. The world is racing toward tomorrow. But here, in these villages, tomorrow can wait. The people who live here have learned something that the rest of us have forgotten. That the most beautiful places are often the hardest to reach. That the most meaningful lives are often the simplest. That home is not a location on a map. It is a feeling. It is a connection to the land, to the community, to something larger than yourself. If this story moved you, please subscribe. Every view, every comment, every share helps uncover more forgotten places, more villages that time forgot, more people who choose to live on the edge. Thank you for walking through the mountains with me. Peace to the whole world. With respect to the villages that time could not destroy.